This podcast is brought to you by Consolidation Coach, the leading M&A consulting firm in the collision repair industry.
Hey there, it's Jason Stahl bringing you a brand new podcast, Consolidation Nation, sponsored by Consolidation Coach. And with me today, I have my two co-hosts, Laura Gay, who is the CEO and president of Consolidation Coach. Welcome, Laura. And we have Tori Jolly, who is the operations manager of Consolidation Coach. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Jason. We're so happy to be here today.
Thank you, Jason. Hello, everybody.
You're welcome. I'm doing great, thanks. And so first of all, this is a brand new podcast, Consolidation Nation. And Laura, I wanted you first to explain what Consolidation Coach is for our audience.
Sure. So I am a former small MSO shop owner. I'm going to tell on myself. I've been in the collision space for 34 years. And I sold my shops about 10 years ago. And after selling, I realized there was a lot of shop owners that quite honestly were selling their shops and calling me for help and guidance. And some that, didn't know me, that I'd find out later they sold their shops and they left money on the table. And they were just like me. They left that, they worked hard every day, 10, 12 hours a day or more, weekends, washing cars when porters didn't come to work. And I just felt like you give your blood, you give your sweat, you give your tears every day to to your customers and to your teammates and just the whole business. And when it's time to sell, when it's time to go to the next chapter, that's when you realize the fruits of your labor. And leaving money on the table or getting taken advantage of, in my opinion, that's not the time for that to happen. It's not the time ever for it to happen, but especially at that time. So after just watching this play out over and over again, I decided to create Consolidation Coach, which is a firm that specializes in helping independent collision repairers and small MSOs, medium MSOs, large MSOs, through the selling process by helping them understand what the value of their business is, what the market value of their business is versus the value of their business, real estate exit options, and understanding the tax consequences and pretty much the gamut while holding their hand through the entire process.
So thanks, Laura. So this new podcast, Consolidation Nation, sponsored by Consolidation Coach, we're going to be talking 100% about consolidation, mergers and acquisitions, who are the buyers, who are the sellers, and if you're a shop, what is the best way to position yourself for a sale, 100%. So my first question to you, Laura, it's 2025, it's the new year. What does the consolidation landscape look like? I know for the last several years it's been hot and heavy. It's been pretty consistent. In some years, it's been more than others. But, it seems like 2025 is setting up to be a very exciting, dynamic year for consolidation. Tell me what it looks like.
Sure. So the landscape, could not be greener, to be honest with you. We spend usually the last couple months of the year, November and December, between going to SEMA and having lots of meetings with all the consolidators to gauge and get a good understanding of what their growth plans are for the subsequent year. And pretty much from what we gather from all the consolidators, the private equity, pretty much all the buyers in general, it's full speed ahead. And obviously, some of these buyers are in different stages of their life cycle of being in business. They all have different approaches, but it couldn't be greener, to be honest.
So Laura, you mentioned in your article you recently wrote for us that 2025 was going to be a bang-up year for consolidation for several factors. And you mentioned the political landscape, the economy, and other factors. So tell me specifically, again, those factors as they play into why 2025 is going to be a huge year for consolidation.
Great question, Jason. So over the last year, as we've been seeing inflation, rise significantly, and while that's been playing out in the background, the growth of these consolidators, private equity, having interest in the collision space has continued to grow and morph. You would think with interest rates being, at an all-time high, at least in my lifetime, that this would be something that would cause, a slowdown. And quite honestly, we're not seeing that at all. We're seeing more consolidators, more private equity, more interest in the auto body collision space, growing these either small micro brands, medium brands, small brands, large brands. We're just seeing the continued growth in some sector or another. There's really nothing slowing down about it at all. A lot of this has to do, quite honestly, it seemed like, the politics, for 2025 anyway, with the new president coming in, there's a lot of people that are seeing, a positivity on the horizon as far as it comes to economics and the country having a turnaround. We aren't having parts delays anymore. That was it wasn't an uncommon thing for shops to have, 20 cars that they were waiting for parts on, having some sort of parts constraint or delay or issue. It wasn't a common thing for a shop to have 10 cars on the ground that were done, waiting, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days for a part, couldn't deliver it because of that. Or they had cars delivered back to customers waiting for one little small thing. I think we're beyond all that. And I think that just with all of this positivity buzzing around and more people gaining an understanding of, the collision space is not just a bunch of, grease monkeys, if you will. We are really being looked at as more of a professional, well-trained, necessary industry that's not going away anytime soon. Even with all these electric cars that drive themselves and things like this, it's the collision space is not going away. It is definitely a needed business. It's not, something that's going to be trendy or trending. So I think that's a lot of the reasons why we're seeing it just continue to grow and not slow down.
Yeah, good points. And I remember, Laura, you telling me that you felt like maybe a year ago or more than a year ago, as money got more expensive to borrow, there was going to be a slowdown. And you just said that there was no slowdown. It just kind of shows the strength and the dynamics and the power of this market. And frankly, we know why. There's a huge return on your investment as if you're a private equity firm and a major consolidator. It's very money driven, and we saw the flurry of activity last year. And then at the end of the year, we saw a flurry as if they were trying to get their last minute acquisitions in. And there are some major consolidators who are competing for these shops. There's only so many shops to buy, right? There's plenty of runway here. We know that, but they're all competing for the best shops. And so I wanted to talk about these consolidators, Laura, because in your article too, you mentioned quite poetically that they've grown, they've matured from little tots and immature little kids to full-grown mature adults. And explain that to me more, that how these major consolidators, these major players, these guys that are buying all the shops have evolved from children to adults.
Yeah. So, I think about, the collision consolidation space, and, I sold my stores coming up on 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, we had 3 players. We had Caliber, we had Gerber, and we had Service King. And we all know that Service King, was purchased by Crash Champions. But if you think about, Caliber and Gerber, 10 years ago, they were in their infancy stages. I don't know how many shops they had at that time. I don't know. I don't have the demographics on it, but they were small. They weren't national, and over the last 10 years, they have grown into large national corporate chains that offer, collision repair across the United States with standard operating procedures, and they have really created a brand. And they both have over 1,000 locations. And as they have, grown and evolved, they've kind of grown up. They are the grown-ups in the collision space now. And then, you've got some people that have entered the collision space, in the last, 5 years, you know what I mean? Classic Collision is one good example. We've watched them grow pretty quickly, so they're kind of, if you think about the different consolidators, whether it's the names or the names that you don't know or you've never heard of, and there's just so many out there, so many buyers. I mean, it used to be, there was 10 or 15. I mean, now there's in the hundreds of buyers out there, a good bit of them unnamed or flying under private equity name that you just don't know of. And just with that said, there's just a plethora out there of them, and they're just very diverse, what they're looking for, what they're doing, what their goals, ultimately are.
So with what you just said, Laura, there's lots and lots of buyers out there, and there's still new buyers coming into here. Over time, we've talked about it being a buyer's market. We've talked about it being a seller's market. We've talked about it being a buyer's and seller's market. But it sounds like to me that 2025, it's going to be a seller's market. Am I wrong?
I would say that it is definitely going to be a seller's market, more so over. There's less and less shops, to buy because, over the last 10 years, a lot of the, I don't want to call it better shops have been bought, but, most of the shops that were existing that were, we'll call leaders of their market or the industry, a lot of them have been bought up. Since then, a lot of other shops have evolved and become really great shops and leaders in their market. So now that we've got these new entry, buyers in the market, like Classic, not so much Classic, but definitely Classic and Vive and Quality Collision Group, and there's a plethora of other ones. They are basically, you're seeing lots of markets go through a round 2 or in some cases round 3 of consolidation. And with that, I think it's important to understand a little bit about consolidation and what drives different markets. On that, Jason, if we can just talk about basically markets and what drives the buying in different markets for a moment.
Sure.
Awesome. So I think it's important to understand that some markets are hotter than others and understanding what drives that. So what happens is, for example, when I sold my stores, almost 10 years ago, that was in the infancy stages of consolidation. And basically there was 2 markets that were really focused as ground zero. And that was the North Carolina market or Carolinas, and then the Maryland, DC, Virginia market. So basically the idea is they came in and they wanted to get the best of the best, or they're looking to create a footprint of the better shops. They want to acquire the better shops. And basically then they came in and they buy up whatever's in that area that they can buy up to create a footprint. Then once that footprint is created, then they will go out like another 30 miles. And then if the city's large enough, then they'll go out another 30 miles beyond that. So 60 miles out to create, think of it as a hub and a spokes mentality, or, basically so that they have coverage for that whole entire city. Now, this doesn't apply for all consolidators, but this is a general rule. So sometimes, there might be, for example, in Ohio and Indiana and Kentucky right now, a lot of the consolidators, there's a lot of activity in those markets right now. So, this time next year, that still might be a thing there, but as they develop those markets, they move on, think of it as pack their bags and move on to other markets to develop. So I think that's an important thing to understand, that when consolidators are in your market and they're actually, looking to acquire shops, that's when you're going to see, the highest offers, the best deals. What I'm saying is selling may not always be on your timeline. And it certainly wasn't on mine. I was 42 when I sold my stores. And looking back on that, I'm a firm believer that God gives you what you need when you need it at the time. And it was such a blessing for me now looking back, because I'm able to do this now and just give back to so many collision repairers on a completely different level. So I think it's important to understand that concept as well.
Yeah, and you talked about looking for shops, consolidators looking for shops. What are they looking for? I know in body shop business, many times you've explained some of the bullet points of what are consolidators looking for in a shop. Is it OE certifications? Is it DRPs? Is it community reputation? Talk to me a little bit about what those guys are looking for when they're going to rate a shop as far as a potential acquisition.
Jason, if it's okay, I'm going to let Tori take this one.
Wonderful, sure.
It's a wonderful question, Jason. The consolidators and the buyers, there's a couple things that they are really looking for. That would be the 10,000 square foot. They like a larger shop. They like their sales to be at least 1.5 million a year. And they like a DRP centric shop. iCar Gold is another really big incentive. And their population, they like a bigger city, not necessarily has to be huge, but 30,000 population or more really is a good number that they're looking for. And also they love a shop that is not ran by the owner. I know it seems as a shop owner, you would think in your head that you think you're doing more for the company and that these consolidators love to see that, which not saying they don't love to see it, but they do love having a shop manager in place.
And I'll add a little color to that. The sales being 1.5 million or more, is a really key factor, because anything under that, it's just not something where there's just enough profits or meat on the bone for a buyer. And the iCar Gold is a huge, think of it as a light switch. If a consolidator buys a shop that is iCar Gold, they can come in and align with their DRP partners and basically, turn on whatever DRPs that they have arrangements with, just kind of like a light switch. If the shop they're acquiring has iCar Gold. If not, then they've got to, take the next 6 months to a year to, get certification, and, just slows down the process, if you will, for them.
All right. So guys, you're telling me that consolidators are looking for a shop that isn't run by the owner. Explain that a little bit more. I think what it means is that it's a shop that runs itself. It is autonomous. It has standard operating procedures and processes in place. It has maybe lean manufacturing built into it, right? Where the owner doesn't necessarily have to be there every day. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, those are all great things, but quite honestly, it's a shop that its daily operations are run by someone other than the owner or principal of the business. A lot of collision shop owners, it's called Steve's Auto Body. When you walk in the shop, you ask for Steve, he's running the place, for a shop that, continues to, be in business and such, that's great. But for a consolidator, when they're acquiring a shop, they really prefer that there is a manager that is in place that is running daily operations, and that Steve isn't there every day, or Steve can be there, but he's not the go-to person, because obviously when they acquire the shop, in most cases, Steve's going to retire, or he's going to go do a new job or a new venture or a 2.0, you know what I mean? And, when Steve leaves, then, basically the apple cart gets turned over. They're wanting to buy a shop where the manager is there. And basically, the only thing that's really changing is ownership and maybe a little bit of operations, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And so let's look at the shop that maybe wants to sell. Maybe they're dying to sell. Maybe they're ready to get out. But after reading your articles, Laura, they're like, my shop is not in position to sell. And who would want my shop? How long do they have to get their ducks in a row? Maybe the revenue isn't where it needs to be, or, they don't have the right employees in place. Things are chaotic in the shop, whatever the case might be, but they want to sell. How long do they have? Because as you said earlier, sometimes consolidation comes to you first and you're not ready, right? And they're in and out of your city and you better be ready. How long do they have to get their ship in order?
This is a great question also. So I'll be honest with you. I would say, there's that checkbox that we kind of went down, the 10,000 square foot, the iCar goal, the this, the that, right? Don't feel like if you don't fall into those boxes or you don't check all those boxes, that doesn't mean that, should the consolidation tide come into your backyard, that doesn't mean that you're not in a position to sell, or that you're ready but you don't feel like you're ready, like you feel like you've got a lot of work to do. I'll be honest with you, it's the old saying, there's a lid to every jar, right? There is a buyer for pretty much every shop in the United States. It's just finding that buyer. And it's just, you have to figure out, where do you fit? You know what I mean? Do you fit over in this category, and then finding that buyer. And that's really, quite honestly, really what it comes down to. If it's something where you really want to sell, you need to sell. There is a buyer out there. There is a lid for your jar. We just got, us, you just need to find them.
Great. And so let me throw you a little curveball here, Laura, or maybe, cause some chaos and excitement here. 2025, like, do you see, like, okay, we're going to see, obviously, Classic buying this shop and that shop, and Crash Champions buying this shop and that shop. Maybe it's a single store here. Maybe it's a 3-shop chain here. Do you see, like, a mega merger, like Classic buying Crash, or vice versa, or Classic buying Vive, or anything, groundbreaking like that?
So, like anything, when you're this close to a business, there's definitely some things going on in the background. And unfortunately, I'm not privy or in a position where I can really share those things. But there's definitely, some, we'll just call it some major activity going on in the background. But it's just going to continue to create more positivity and more if we're going 100 miles an hour, in the space of consolidation, it's going to be 120. It's just continuing to speed up. And all this is going to do is continue to, allow the growth to continue.
Great. Well, Laura and Tori, thank you so much for your time today. It's been awesome co-hosting this first episode of Consolidation Nation with you. And you know what? Episode 2, we're going to talk about wolves in sheep's clothing, which, Laura, you mentioned to me. I'm very curious to find out what that's all about. So long for now.
See you next time.
See ya.